Testing. Recording.
Paul,
Yes.
so I went to try to make a new account, but it looks like you have to have a new
Yeah, I'll
email to
talk
make
about
a.
that.
Okay, cool, cool,
I have a
cool.
specific thing. So the first thing I want to mention is I'm going to share my screen actually, is that that question about the email, because they don't want you to basically be a serial creator of accounts. So they don't let you create one. I show a way to get around that easily without having two different accounts. I want you to go back to this site of the class and re-download the week 2 presentation because I made some changes to that. So we'll just start with that. I'm gonna go start the slideshow. Actually, I don't want to do this. I want to do the slideshow just in the, not full screen. It's easier for me. All right. So, and we are recording, and it looks like we have 3 return students. Hopefully more will dwindle in, sprinkle in, whatever the point I'm trying to make, come in slowly. So we talked about all this good stuff last time. Why do we want to use REDCap, getting started, creating a project and an account, and creating a data instrument. And then on your own, well, I showed you how to create an export, a report and export, and then you're on your own, you were asked to do the lab. Today, we're going to talk about recreating the project in the account, and then we'll spend a good chunk of time talking about surveys, importing data, project status, and then a wealth of other features we'll just mention. So the first thing is this recreating the trial accounts. And if you did that, you might have gotten this error message saying account already created, sorry, but I got this message when I tried it just the other day. So there's a trick to doing that. So first of all, this is the URL you can go to create the new account. If you don't have that handy, you don't actually have to go back, or you can go back to the lab one. There's a slightly different URL that redirects to this URL. Anyway, here's the trick. If you take your email address, say I put puser at uw.edu, or if you maybe you chose to use a Gmail account, this trick will work with both. You just basically put a plus sign and then anything, but I suggest just starting out with a 1, and that will make your new account unique as far as Vanderbilt is concerned. But those emails will still go to your email address. So puser +1 at uw.edu, all the emails that will go to puser at uw.edu. And likewise, if you do that in Gmail, and I believe Yahoo does it, and most other email providers, I have found 1 or 2 don't do that, don't allow the plus mechanism, but shouldn't be a problem because I know you all have UW email addresses as a start. And it does work with that. And you'll find this trick is actually useful. We'll talk about this when doing surveys later, that we can actually use this trick to quickly spin up a bunch of survey participants and have all those emails go to you when you're testing. Any questions about this?
This is amazing. That's all.
Okay, good. Thanks, Barbara.
Yeah, Paul, I have to thank you for this. There's been like 20 other instances where this little trick has become incredibly useful in my life. So yeah, Paul's got a wealth of knowledge. This is a great one for sure.
Yeah, and obviously you can sequence these. So you could do +1 for the first participant, 2, 3, 4. So you can have a slew of participants and track them with like the study ID, matching that. So when you do various communications, testing out things, it's fun. Anyway, so going back to the first thing, if you didn't take a copy of the data dictionary, here is that starting data dictionary. Basically, we saved it for you if you didn't, but it's nice if you restore your own, because then it will have all your customizations if you made any. And then these are the steps to do that. You can do that if you haven't yet. Well, we're continuing. So what's a survey in REDCap and how does it differ from an instrument? So instruments by default can only be used as a data entry form. So if we go back to this project we all created, transportation, I'm going to boost the font just a little here. And let's say I did this. This is the design right in here. And then to create records, I can either go to the data record status dashboard, click add new record, or I can go to add new records. It's the same thing. Doesn't really matter which place I did it. And I can add new records, no problem. But what if I want someone else to use this questionnaire? What if I want Matt to do that? Well, it turns out if I want Matt to be able to enter data into my project or database, I have to go and add him as. So first of all, I have to make sure he gets an account on this server. He happens to have one, so I can do that. I can find him, but you have to deal with that, and then I have to add him and give him the correct rights. And I'm not going to talk about that at this time. And now Matt can go and add records to this project, but that obviously is not a sustainable way to encounter your participants in a study if you want them to be able to enter data. We're not going to manage thousands of user accounts and their passwords and adding them to the server and all that. That's just, no, it's not going to work. So that approach can only be used by logged in users who are in the REDCap, on the REDCap server. Often you'll want to be able to have an instrument completed by someone who's not a user, and we call those people participants in REDCap, which is used by when you do research, people call it study participants. So you do this by enabling an instrument to be used as a survey. There's one piece you'd have to do for the project, for the entire project, if you have multiple instruments, and that you would come in here, you go into project setup, and it's this very first button on the page, which is enable use surveys in this project. So now when you go to the designer, there's this new column called enable as survey. Now I guess I had already I had enabled it previously, so I'm going to show what it looks like when it's not enabled. The button looks like this, enable, and you click on that and that enables it. And then it pops up the survey properties or attributes for that particular instrument. And there's a long list of survey properties you can change. We won't talk about that quite yet, but you can just click save and it's enabled it with all the defaults at this point. Okay, that's what we did. Once enabled, surveys settings control how the instrument looks and behaves when taken as a survey. We'll talk about just a few of those. I'm going to go back and look at those settings. I get to the survey settings by clicking here once it's been enabled. First one is the survey title, and I'll just give you my quick thing on them, but there's so many I can't possibly go through all of them. You want to have a nice title that shows at the top. This can be different than the name that you've given to the instrument, but this is the title bar of what the participant will see. The next thing is this survey instructions. I generally wipe that out. If you don't, and show quickly, and someone takes the survey, and we'll talk about how to take the survey in a bit, but I'll just skip that for now. Then you get this extra stuff wasting room at the top of your survey. Probably don't need that. Most people know how to take a survey. So most of the time, we're going to go into survey settings and just get rid of that entirely just by deleting it. Most of these other things, you can play with the font size and various things. A couple things I want to hone in on are, I guess this is not on the slide, but question numbering. You can have it auto numbered, so it automatically gives a number if you're not giving numbers to your field labels or question labels. Or you can do it a custom yourself. It defaults to whatever you have now. It doesn't try to add anything. So But the other one I want to talk about is pagination. If you want to separate your survey into multiple pages, you click that, and then I generally click this display page numbers at the top of the survey page. I do not click the second button. There's lots of other things you can play with in here. The other one I tend to do automatically is at the bottom. When you complete, it gives you a little message saying, thank you for taking the survey, have a nice day. I usually get rid of the have a nice day. Most people agree that's annoying. So we do that. Let me explain how the pagination works, however. So if I take this survey again, I'm going to go over that. Notice there's a next page. How did that get in there? Did it just magically decide the size of the page? No. You have a tool to do that, and that is the section, begin new section. So whenever there's a begin new section, there's only one in this particular survey. And remember the way you added that, I'll show it, was just to go between the two fields that you want to add that page break and click add field. You call that begin new section. You don't actually have to put text in it, but I had it say auto. Just a quick tip, but I'm not going to talk about it anymore. For all the field labels, if you click the checkbox here, you can get fancy text labels. You can do all sorts of weird stuff with the label. And you can change the font and the size and all sorts of stuff like that. So something to think about. I'm going to cancel because I don't really want that to look like that. That's true with all fields across surveys and forms. You can always use this rich text editor if you'd like to play with the label. Okay, let's go back to the slides. So we talked about this. Whenever I talk about surveys, it's kind of a little tricky because you could take the point of view of talking about surveys from the way the features are laid out in REDCap, or you can approach it from the way what you're trying to accomplish. And I'm going to try to do sort of a merging of those two. Try to take an approach of what are you trying to accomplish, what are you starting with, what are you trying to end with, and then also layer on top the REDCap features. So surveys can be classified by the way you administer them and whether the participant is known, which is called identified, or unknown, anonymous. So I have three types of sort of approaches. They're not really types of surveys. They're types of approaches to administering a survey, I should say. One would be surveying anonymous participants. We'll talk about how to do that. Another one would be surveying a set of participants where someone gives you, perhaps it's your boss, perhaps you are doing sort of a follow-up to some population that was identified by another researcher. They've given you their email addresses or mobile phone numbers if you're using SMS. SMS is just another word for text messaging. You might start with that. You don't really know their names, but you have their email address or phone number. And then another approach would be that you or someone else has identifying information about these people, complete identifying information, and that gets entered into REDCap in a form or a survey where you capture that initially, and then you do additional surveys to that existing pool of participants. So another way to quickly look at these are these one-time encounters with the participant? Yeah, number one and number two are usually one-time encounters, but actually they can be multiple encounters if you continue in the process after that. But the third one is definitely you're doing a follow-up of a person you've already identified. And how these people get invited, the first one is through the URL. When I did the examples a few minutes ago, I was always using the generic URL. But when you have this set of participants that someone has given you, or you've acquired yourself, but all you have is their email address, that is put into something called the participant list. It's a starting point for how you talk to the participants and ask them, invite them to take that survey. And then the third approach is like we use in the dog aging project that Matt and I work on, where we've identified these people who are going to be part of our study, and we're continuing to survey them over a long period of time. So let's talk first about sort of the one-time approach. You only need to know something about someone. Maybe looking at it's a political survey or a psychological survey where you just want to talk to a population and sample data information from that population. So you can use one of two approaches. One is the totally anonymous approach, where you give them a generic URL. And if you create a project with a survey, and the survey is the first instrument, that automatically, when one of the things you got, in addition to being able to click enable this as a survey when you said here to use surveys in this project, is this new link here under data collection called survey distribution tools. And in there, this is the link to that survey. I can go in here and grab it, or and then type it and then paste it into a browser, or I can just click right here and it does the same thing and just opens up a new window and the survey starts. In fact, I have 2 instances of that already, or 3. But going back to the project, I can now post that. Maybe I can put that on a website. That you can also get a short version of that link. You can also get a QR code, so you could put it on a poster. You can do variations, but it's all going to this URL. You know nothing about the person clicking on it in advance, right? Some random person just clicks on it that saw your advertisement or your promotional materials. That's this generic URL approach, totally anonymous. Now, they might not end up being anonymous because then you might ask them to identify themselves in the survey. That's up to you, but they start out as anonymous. The other approach is this idea of a participant list that contains either the email or mobile phone number of a person. Each participant gets and in that case, when you invite them, and I'll show you how to do that, they get a custom URL that then lets you track them so that you know that person, that email address they answered, this email address they didn't answer, etc. And you can do repeat reminders for that population to say, hey, we sent you this link last week. Can you get with it? So the totally anonymous approach, we just showed that. For a one-time one-time survey for non-anonymous people where you have them in this participant list, I'll show you how to do that. You go into survey tools, we're in there, and you click on the participant list tab. And this participant list tab, now people have already taken this particular, let me see something. What did I do here? I'm going to do just a little something to make this more interesting. Erase the data. Okay. Now I'm going to come back. No participant list. Okay. Sorry, I had played with it before, obviously. So what I want to do is click add participants, and you get this little box. Notice you didn't get import participant list, unfortunately. But if you have a CSV file, a spreadsheet, or just even in a Word file, but with the participants each in a new line, you can cut and paste that. So I could put in, anyway, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to say plit1+1 at uw.edu, hit line return, and then plit1+2 at uw.edu, and you get the idea. Obviously, they don't all have to be me, but in this case, they are. And now this is our participants here. And this will have tracking information about that. And the way I invite them is I click this compose survey invitation. So that was, this is what we talked about here. If you had enabled SMS or text messaging, then you could enter a phone number instead. So now we're going to go to compose survey invitations, and wow, it's really big because I made this really big fonts. So I'm going to reduce it a little so it can all fit into the window. And there's several sections of this. First of all, go a little bigger now. First section is, when do you want to send these surveys? Immediately. So as soon as I click yes, or later in the day, or tomorrow, or whatever, first day of February, I'm going to go with immediately. Do you want to send reminders as part of this invitation? And generally that's a good idea. So you basically send the first one immediately, and then send every 3 days. And then you can also choose to send the reminders at an exact date or time. That's really only works for one reminder. So you want to send up to 2 times. You can choose how you want this here. What's the outbound address? This is you're only gonna be able to use address of people who have accounts in this project, and there's a few right now. You can also put a display name in here. So if I had a study name, such as transpose study, gives you a nice label in the email. Why am I not able to do this? Previously used. There. Subject. I'm going to be quick with this since we don't have a ton of time. And then it gives you a nice sort of boilerplate for this survey that works for all surveys. That says, please take the survey. You would obviously want to customize this, our transportation survey, or, maybe mention how you got their name, etc. It gives 2 versions of the link. Basically, it gives a nice version of the link, which will have the name of the survey, the one that you put in the survey settings. And then it gives, say, some older browsers may have trouble with links that look like that, or that so they give this alternate, which is the full URL. And then you probably want to put a signature, something like that. Then you can choose over here, reduce this a little again. Do you want to have everyone in your participant list, or only some certain ones? Maybe I don't want this guy here, but these 2 to send it. And then I have to be able to scroll down. So I have to make it smaller again and click send invites. And then they got invited. So if I looked at my, let's see, I should be able to go to my Office 365 email right from the browser. And I need to use my password program to get the right. You're kidding. Let me try one more time, sorry. Otherwise, I will abandon this and just switch the window. Oh, it's because I chose the wrong user. Try this again. There. Hey, I'm bailing on this. Let's go and I will open my Outlook and share Outlook. I don't know what I was doing wrong there. So here's the one. You see this got sent to +2. This got sent to +1. The nice thing is by having that unique email that you can track when you try different things. And this person's, you'll notice that this part of the email is different than this, which lets REDCap track that. So if I take it as 2, if I click on this version, because this is easier to use, it's going to open up my browser. I'm going to now change the share back to the browser. And here it's come up. How do I get to work? Well, when I go to work, I took the bus. Do I own a car? Yes. One. It's electric. And that's it. And that, thank you for taking the survey. That was the closing thing. So now if we go in here and we look at this screen and refresh it, you should see that there's a check marks next to this person, PLIT 2. And if I go to the record status dashboard, I will see an entry for this person that they entered. And you'll notice when you use surveys, it essentially locks the survey down. If you have rights to edit responses, which you can play with user rights, then I can go and edit that changes. But I don't generally want to do that unless there's some reason, because I want essentially that response to be for that person, and I don't want to tamper with it in general. There might be some reasons you need to change that. If the survey, if someone has mistold you and then gives you correct information, you might want to go back and change it. So now it's your turn. In this lab, you'll be able to enable the instrument you created in the last lab to be survey, or the one before that, lab 2, actually. And modify is designed by adding some section heads, and then go ahead and take the survey 2 different ways. It's 10:32 now. How about we come back at 10:45? Okay. Any questions before we get started? Okay, Matt and I will be here to help you if you need it.
Yeah, and I just took a second to go through the file account recreation with the cool +1 trick, data dictionary. I skimmed and wasn't reading, forgot you still have to create a new project when you log back in. First, like we had done in lab 1, but create a new project and then you can access the data dictionary to quickly upload that file if you need to get yourself right back on track.
Right. You'll still have to have the data dictionary, either the one you saved or the new one you downloaded from the site. Great.
Okay.
Do not be afraid to ask questions, either using your voice, unmuting yourself, or in the chat window. Okay, it's 10:45. We are going to resume. I know at least one of you I saw had a problem with their account getting expiring while they were doing the lab, which is unfortunate. That's why I tried to subtly encourage everyone to create a new account, even if the old one was still there, because this has happened before where people get booted out in the middle, which is really terrible, but that's the way it is. So hopefully you can catch up, Barbara, and if that happened to anyone else. But now let's talk about follow-up surveys. So contrasting with one-time survey, this is a contrast of one-time surveys and follow-up surveys. So in the last section, we used either a generic URL or a participant list to invite participants to take that survey. You were the participant and the user, but normally the participants would be others. It's really important, though, to note that the participant list does not become part of the REDCap record. So if I go back here, I go under survey distribution tools. That's how I get to the participant list. This is the participant list. And I can export it if I'd like, but what happens normally is there no relationship to this. You could think of this as sort of data that's external to REDCap, because when I look at the results of the questionnaire, I just have the answers to the questionnaire. I don't have the email address unless I re-asked it in there. They do have this little mechanism where in the participant list you can put a second identifying field like their name or some other identifier like their student number if you wanted, and that makes it so you could link the two if that identifier was in both places. But by default, it's totally anonymous and it's separate. And when you export the data here, there's no relationship to the participant list. Now, that's handy if that's your intention. But if you want to take a individual, a person or a dog or whatever, and follow them over time with multiple surveys, you have to have some way to identify them and to go back after them continuously over time. And the way you do this is that you collect a piece of information. I'm going to switch to another project, transportation with the designated email field. Let's look at the design of this project slightly different. So I have a new form injected before the survey. Actually, it also is a survey. So basically, I can survey someone, ask them their name and email address, or I could have ascertained this some other way and data entered it, or maybe imported it in from this. So in other words, you could have a list of information you start with. Instead of using it as a participant list, you actually pull it in as data. And that's the email address here, which its field name is DM_email. Then I go to project setup. And under this enable optional modules and customizations, there's this, I'm going to disable this and re-enable it. And I click here, designate an email for communications. And there I select the field. Now, how does it know that to suggest this field? The reason it does is because we've formatted that field as, if you remember when you learned from last week, we can format a text box field as using validation, or validate it as an email and not format it. And so because we validated it as email, only the validated email addresses can be used in this section here. So that's why that's the only one that shows up, because that's the only one that was validated as an email address. Now, because of that, I can encounter or invite these participants a different way. By the way, if you want to use text messaging, you do have to set that up with whoever your admin for your REDCap installation is. And it does require needing a credit card because you'll work with a service, either Twilio or Mozio, or to text messaging services. It's essentially a gateway between REDCap the text messaging service and the phone number that it gets texted, SMS message to. So you'd have to work with them to set it up. Once you do that, it opens up slightly different options in REDCap to let you work with the phone numbers instead. We're not going to do that, but just wanted to mention that that's there. So two ways to invite, actually 3 ways, and I'll mention 2 of them. I can go now, and as I collect people in this project now, what happens is they automatically get appended to my participant list. Notice this, because I collected it and using that option to designate an email address, it actually puts the record number. So they're no longer anonymous. It does now link this to this, and I can go back and do the compose survey invitation. And that'll work. You could do that in batches, but there's a better way. Most of the time, you'll want to use something called the automated survey invites. This option makes it easy to automatically invite participants to complete a follow-up survey on a rolling enrollment basis. So they don't have to be done in one batch or in several batches. So to do compose survey invitations, so we step back, the first option, we use the participant list. The one thing to realize though, when we go in here, we have to pre-select which survey to invite them to before we click the compose box, because by default it will do the very first survey. So if we want to actually invite them to the transportation survey, which is the second one, then we click that, and then we'll have and it knows which users already took that survey. So notice well, whatever. You have the ability to check all, uncheck all, or whatever. These are all the ones that have email addresses, and you can play with that. And otherwise, you have the same options. But this is fairly limited and requires, like I said, doing it in batches. A better option is to use automated survey invites, and I have 3 slides on this. And the way you do this is you go in here to the designer again, and you click automated invitations. And this opens up a dialog that's not totally dissimilar to the compose survey invites. So it has a lot of the same areas. And one of them, by the way, is you can inactivate it. You can create it and keep it inactive until you're ready to launch it. But you have the ability to compose a message, choose the email to use a display name if you want. It puts in the actual name of the survey as the subject, which is fine in this case. The title of the survey, actually, that was in the survey settings. And then essentially very similar. Well, actually, I modified this, I believe, previously. Or I probably did this previously because this is already set up. And but this stuff is the same as compose, but the differences are here, steps 2, 3, and this optional thing. Step 2 is, how does someone get invited? You can set it up 2 options, which can be combined if you'd like. So one is when someone completes the demographic, automatically send an email to invite them to do the transportation survey. And you can put in a delay there so that it actually waits to the next day, which is handy if you don't like to hit people with the same survey immediately. So I can say select the next day or the next weekday if it happens to be a weekend. It skips the weekend, and then you could choose what time if you want that to be like at whatever 8:52 a.m. So that's one way you could do it. And then as soon as they complete this, it'll send the invite. You can actually do the reminders. That was also there in compose survey invites, so there's nothing new there really. But another option is to have some complex logic instead, which can involve potentially multiple fields on multiple instruments having to be set to something. So in that demographic form, there could be a question, do you want to participate? And you might want to say they completed the survey, but also they selected yes for that particular question, which I didn't create in this case. So I won't put any extra logic in, but you can have it do this and this. Or you can even say it's just when this logic happens, irregardless of when they completed the survey, which if that logic is on that particular survey, then it's the same. It doesn't really matter, but it could come from some other form, for example. The other thing, yeah, that's all I want to say right now. They have this little ability to test it with individual records to see if the logic is true. That is, that person already completed the demographic survey, so it would send if I set that up. Oh. So now it's set up, and now basically, if I won't bother to show this because it's just going to send emails. But if I created a new, if I completed the first survey again, then it would send an invite for the second one. So I did this. You can also decide to inactivate it, as I mentioned. And then I mentioned this stuff and reminders. I just want to say a couple of things. Be aware that only newly completed triggering. So I created one that already had data in there. It's not going to go back and send those invites to data that's already collected unless you go back and resave the data that triggers it. In other words, if it's based on me completing that first survey, I'd have to go in, edit, and resave that survey to complete it. So old records will not be included. The other thing, I put this as explore on your own. In addition to ASIs, you can use something called alerts and notifications that has some similar capabilities, but in some ways some cases is better. I don't have time to really discuss and contrast it, but that you get to from here, alerts and notifications. I'll just say the one thing that alerts and notifications can do that ASIs can't do is it can also send emails to other people. So like staff members, when something happens to a participant. So it isn't only for emails to participants, but it can be used to send emails to participants too. Any questions? Were there any in the chat? I haven't looked. No. Okay. Let's talk about importing data into REDCap. Sometimes you want to bring data into REDCap that was collected elsewhere. The instruments where the data will go have to be already created. So that's something important because sometimes someone will give me I have encountered in my career that someone just gives me a spreadsheet of data and says, can you set up a REDCap with this? REDCap database. And I say, well, no, because I need to understand those fields and know what you want it to the design to look like. Or do you want it all to be text boxes? Usually that's not what people want. They want choices. They want categorical fields to be created where it's, one yes, two no, or whatever. So in this case, REDCap has no magical way of determining the schema for your project. So you do have to create that in advance. But it could be as simple as just making everything text boxes. You'll identify that file and you'll click Data Import Tool under Applications. And you'll also need to get the field names exact. And so let's see how this works. If you have, if I want to import data into this project, notice I have two different instruments. And the import spreadsheet can involve both instruments or just one if you'd like. Let's assume that we're going to try to use only the demographics to import. So what I do is go here to data import. And the first thing to do is to ask it to give you the data import template for for the current state of the project. And so I can do that. And to look at that, we'll have to stop sharing and open the spreadsheet and then share that. So hang on a sec. So here is the spreadsheet in Excel. Here's all our fields. I'm going to click here and expand all of them, and they go out like this. So if I only care about these three, the demographics, and this one perhaps, which I'll talk about in a second, and I don't care about the survey because I actually still want to survey people, I could just delete those. And I can say I'm going to have, and I'll set this, I know I already have a bunch of records in there, and I'll just set the study ID higher. And let's say I'll just make myself and then there is this extra field it adds. Let me make this bigger so you can see it. Called the complete, it takes the name of the form, the internal name. If you remember from last time, you could have a nice name which would have caps and spaces, but this one removes all the caps and spaces, replaces any spaces and special characters with an underscore, and then puts underscore complete. This controls that colored button, which can be either essentially empty or white or gray. It can be yellow, or it can be so it can be red, then it can be yellow, and then it can be green. We want these to be green, so I'll just make it 2, so it just says that it's complete. And I'll do matte. And I'll do that. We'll save it. Let me see that we haven't used that study IDs yet. No. Okay. Save this. Okay, now I'm going to switch back to REDCap. There it is. And I'm going to do the import. No, by the way, just a couple of things. You can import in real time, or you can import as a background process. If you have, say, a few hundred records or something to that effect, you'll probably want to use the background process. But we don't have time to go into that. You have a few options of what happens to the data. Like if you have fields that have blanks, do you want that to overwrite existing data or not? Because it will try to match based on the study ID. And if it finds an existing study ID, it will overwrite that. And this is just what it does with the blanks. But we're going to do this pretty simple because we only have new records. Go into my downloads folder. And right there. Wait, that's not the one. It's this one here. Now, it gives you a preview of the data that's going to get imported. You'll see this is exactly the data that I used. And I get to see that, oh, it's going to use study ID 20 and 21, and it appends this little new record. And it would, if it didn't have new record, it would be updating an existing record. And then it would, in the dialog, show the old values in red and the new values in black. So you would have a chance to decide. It has not imported the data until I click here. It won't. And please try to remember not to make the mistake that I've made in the beginning, which was then I go over here and click back and think the data is imported. It has been canceled. It has been abandoned because I didn't click import again. So let me show that. It never really got imported. So now we'll go back and do it one more time. And this time we'll actually do it. Oh, I chose the wrong file. It's the one that's called template because I didn't change the name from the template that I downloaded. There it is. Now I click import, and now the record should be at the bottom. Here's record 20 and 21. And my address should be in there. Okay. Any questions? So after clicking upload file, this is sort of the trying to emphasize. REDCap will read each record and show your preview. After viewing the preview, you must click import data again. Well, it's different. Must click that button to actually import the data into the project. So now it's time for you to do some importing. Isn't that exciting? This shouldn't be that hard. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes. We'll go to 11:15. It's 11:05 now. So this is lab 5. And just in case you don't have it, I'm going to put this in the chat window like we did last time. Lab 5. Working on that now until 11:15. Okay. Again, any questions, put them in the chat window. I'm going to stop sharing for now. So it's 11:15. We're gonna get restarted. I apologize. I posted those Google Docs not thinking that they were essentially private docs, but we made them all available here separately. So on the site, so you should really be downloading them there, not using the Google Docs, which I deleted from the chat. Sorry about that. My mistake. So any questions about the lab? That was a pretty easy one, I think. But if you do have questions, please post them or speak up. Okay. We're moving along, which means we'll probably have some time for questions at the end, Q&A, which is great. So let's talk about project status. So all projects start out in development status. Development projects can be freely edited and you can make radical changes without really having any constraints. Let me take a look at our projects here. There's two ways, at least two ways, probably more than two, but two that I can think of to tell what status your project is in. One, in the My Projects page, this little wrench means it's in development. All these projects are in development. But if I show these other projects, which some of these, one at least, which is in production, it shows this checkbox for production. Within the individual project, though, if I go into books, I can move a project into production. If you look in project setup, these sections you can go through and say, it's supposed to give you, it's kind of giving you a checklist so that when you go into production, you know, okay, I did this stuff. I did this stuff. These I'm done's don't do anything, by the way. They're just a visual checklist for yourself. I enabled all the modules I want to enable. I said I'm not going to do bookmarks. That doesn't matter. I've adjusted user rights. I've tested thoroughly, which you should always do. And now I'm ready to move the project into production. So I come into here in the bottom of project setup and click move to production. Depending on the installation, this might, after you do this, it might send an email to the admin and the admin has to okay it before it goes, or it might go through automatically. So then the choice you have is, should you keep all existing data or do you want to delete all that data and start fresh? Most of the time, this delete all the data and start fresh makes sense because you should be testing with test data that you don't want in the final project. But there might be some reasons to do otherwise. You can delete the data as you're going and maybe then import some data that you want to still be in the project. So in that case, you'd say keep. So it's really up to you to decide. And then I click yes. It gives you, says, you really want to do this? It's going to delete all your data. And now it's moved into production. Oh, the other thing I didn't show you, sorry, is in the individual project, I'm going to choose a different one so I can show it. Right here, it says project status. Right there. It also says it on the project homepage, I believe, somewhere. I thought it did. Guess not. But it does say it right there. So, but now go back to the project we just threw into production. This changes to say production right there. Okay, it shows up one or two other places, but I can't remember exactly where. Well, I showed you in my projects as well. So what is that? What happens when you go into production? Well, first of all, you only want to collect real data when in production because there's safeguards that are set up. Once in production, updates to the design require entering into draft mode where you can safely draft your changes while existing users and participants still see the old design until those changes are finalized. And REDCap also automatically keeps a copy of your data dictionary every time you go into draft mode. And so it keeps an audit trail of all the different versions of your project when in production. It also disallows some types of things, like you can't delete a field once you're in production because it's assumed that you've collected data. And once you've collected data, you shouldn't be throwing it away. So if you ever need to do that, maybe change a field, what you'll need to do is hide the old field and then show a new version of the field, perhaps, or just hide it if you're not replacing it with anything. So if I want to make changes now in books, since that was put into production, I can't. If I go to click here, it'll say you're in production. You can't do that. So I have to do this thing called entering draft mode. Enter draft mode. Now I can go in here and make changes, but I'll show you something after we make a change. So let's add something, and I'm not going to worry about this field. I'm just going to call it a new question. It's just going to be a yes, no question. Okay. So now if someone goes and is using my, using this, notice I don't see new question on here because this is considered, I'm still adding record. And if it was a survey, any surveys would still show the old state of the form. But there is this new, nice new feature that was added just a few versions ago called draft preview mode, where I can go in here while I'm in draft, have changes drafted. By the way, I can also go in here and say, I can see all the changes that were made. So it will show you what those were there. I could preview those. But if I click here and turn on draft preview mode and then go to the records. Oh, wait, I forgot. There's one thing in draft preview mode that doesn't work. Is that it will only work with existing records. So let me collect a record, not in preview mode, meaning it's going to be the old mode. Whatever, I don't really care. And I'll just put some data in here. Okay. So now I can go back to the designer, and if I do draft preview mode, turn it on, and now I open that record, I can open existing record, you'll see the new field will appear, new question. It lets you preview. This is still not shown to survey participants, but it currently will show me what the new version of the form is going to look like. And any data I save here, it puts these buttons in red because it's not really saving it permanently. It's just saving it temporarily. So that, so notice I did that, and I can come back and look at it when in draft preview mode. But when I go back to the designer and say, I want to submit my changes for review, and then an email might go to the admin to allow that, or it might get automatically approved. And I go back to this record, you'll see that that will be empty because it threw away my preview changes because they're not meant to be collected in production. They are just for your previewing of what it would look like for the user experience. That was just added a couple of months ago, that draft preview, which is really nice change. Any questions about production development? So, as I said, oh, the other thing I wanted to show you was if I go into the project designer, the, not there, where is it? The project revision history up here. Sorry. It basically created saved copies of my data dictionary when I moved into production, and then when I did this revision 1, which was the one I just did, and it has a timestamp of 1 minute ago. So it saved the modified data dictionary. And every time I go into draft mode and finalize those changes by submitting them and getting them approved, then it will take another snapshot of that data dictionary, so you have the history of the data dictionaries. Other REDCap features. So we'll try to take a quick tour of a few other features that I find are useful. And then I'll just mention a bunch. So one of the features that is important is this thing called longitudinal projects and the idea of events. So if you need to collect the same data or at multiple time points, you can enable the longitudinal data collection in Project Setup. I'm going to click this button here. Then you have to take each instrument and map them to the event then you create events, finding events, and then you take the instruments and decide, because not every instrument has to be done at every time point. Which time points or event will those instruments be done at? And then the dashboard will change to look like something like this. At the baseline event, demographics and lab values, but at week 1, week 2, and week 3, we had lab values. Let's take a look at what this looks like. So I believe we have that lab one. Here's what we started with. We just created demographics, labs, and I guess I added the psychosocial test, 3 different instruments. I think I might have just added that, I don't remember now. Yeah, I did. The third one was based on a question in the last time I taught this, so I didn't have this. Now, the same first two instruments, but I went into Project Setup, and up here, enabled longitudinal data collection. Then I went into define my events, and I have a baseline event, a week 1, a week 2, a week 3 event. Then I went and designated my events, saying that the demographics is only collected at baseline, but the lab values are collected at all 4 time points. Then when I look at the dashboard, this is what I was showing on the slide. And so as you add a record, then and collect the data, you decide which time point you're collecting it at. If I look at another project, this dog project that I introduced last week, this has quite a few instruments, and this is not set up to collect it longitudinally, although in the dog aging project, we do a lot of things longitudinally. So let's see how I would modify this. This is a very simplified version of what we do. But I would first say use longitudinal, then I would define my events, and I can rename event 1 because I don't really think that's very descriptive. I'll call it baseline. Then I might call this follow up 1 year, and maybe follow up 2 years, something like that. The event name you want to keep somewhat short, but not too short. And I could do it as much as I want. I could have other events that were not necessarily follow up, but are at specific times of the year, like summer 2025. It's up to you. Anyway, then I go into this designate instruments for events. And notice it automatically put everything in baseline. That's what it does by default. But then I would go in here and modify this. So maybe initial contact, study status, and consent are all done at baseline. But the canine social and learned behavior I do at this time point. And maybe for some reason, the treat introduction is only done once. So you might do something like that. And obviously, you could play with it. And now your record status dashboard changes to show you this is the instruments at baseline. This is the instruments that follow up year 1, and this is the only one instrument at follow up year 2. Some of these instruments can be surveys also, and you would invite people to the survey for the events you'd have different invitations to them. In fact, when you do it this way, if some of these are surveys, when I do the invite, say for this canine social learned behavior, you'll see, sorry, that's not what I wanted. Oh, not survey settings. If I did the ASI or automatic invitation, it will ask me which event. So I can set one up for follow-up year 1 and one for follow-up year 2. So those will fire off differently and invite the people at different things. You can also do a similar thing with the, as I mentioned, the alerts and notifications, but we'll leave that. There's also this feature, again, to explore on your own, called repeating instruments, where when you define events, a longitudinal project with events, those are at sort of fixed time points that you preconceive and design in advance. You can have some instruments, though, do what they call repeat on their own, where they, like, you can't predict in advance what those things will be. And that might be used, let's say, for hospitalization. You don't predict when someone will be hospitalized or when someone will have a baby if you're doing a maternity study, for example. So you can look at that on your own. A few other capabilities I want to talk about. We briefly looked at role-based security when I added Matt to my project. You go into user rights and you can add users. Also, you can do these things called create roles, where that way you can have everyone in a certain role have rights in the same way. If you look at some of these rights, they're very you have a lot of flexibility. You can decide certain person can't design the project, but they can enter data. When the data, they automatically get to enter data, and actually you can, for entering data, you can you have the flexibility and the fine granularity to decide for each form whether they can have no access or they have access. There is other things like the survey distribution tools, whether someone can get at that, whether someone can use alerts and notifications, and a bunch of other stuff, which I'm not going to go into. And one of the rights is whether I can manage other users' rights. So that's actually, to show that quickly. The user rights. Can someone manage someone else's user rights? You generally only want people who are at the sort of top tier of your project to be able to do that, because if you let someone manage rights, then they can reset their rights to anything they want. So be aware of that. Randomization support. If you are working, if you are a statistician or working with a statistician who can set up randomization for your project, then the sort of the randomization scheme can be imported into REDCap, and then REDCap, a form can have a randomization button on it, and it will take, basically takes randomization assignments from a randomization table that got imported, and it will assign, randomly assign a participant to one of 2, 3, or 4 groups, whatever. Auto numbering for records, that's real easy. If you go into project setup, that's just right here. Auto number for record. It means the first record will be 1, the second record will be 2, the third record will be 3, and the study ID or record ID, which is always the first field in the first form. So that would be, in this case, it's called study ID. But by default, it calls that, REDCap names that record ID, and then I renamed it. If you don't do that, then you have to assign the ID yourself. If you have surveys, by the way, and the first instrument is a survey, you have to set auto ID, because you don't want the survey user setting their study ID. Rich automated logging. Just very quickly show here under logging here. This will log all of the things that have happened in this project. I deleted a project field. This is doing it for a time range of the 23rd to today, but I can go back further in time. This is showing all the things I did today. I deleted a field actually this morning before I think this class started. I modified project settings, I edited events, I created events, I performed instrument event mapping. And then if I was entering data, so if, let's say, made this go back a year, you would see how that data got in there. And it actually puts, I updated this record and I set those fields to those values. In fact, the data came because I think I imported it from somewhere. If you go back in time, all the way in time, this is several pages, I would see when it initially got set up, and the data got imported. So you say update record, but through an import. So the audit trail is really nice in REDCap. That's one of the reasons people use it. Support for field comments. So when you are collecting data and you come in as a user, in any field, you can click on this little bubble and say, make a comment right there and say, need to check this. And what happens is it's saved with the form, and I can go back and revisit it, but if I don't remember where that was, well, that's tough. But if I go down here to the field comment log, it'll show me all the comments, and then I can go directly to that record and the comment. I didn't actually mean to create a new comment. If I want to go to the record, I could just click there, and it will take me and it will give me to that particular comment, so I can go back. Obviously, if you could just save comments and have no way of finding those comments, that would be pretty hard because you'd have to go record by record to look for them. I can't show all these things. I showed the easy ones. This rich expression language for making calculations and doing branching logic and filtering and reports. And to control your automated survey invites and your alerts. There's this little essentially scripting language where you refer to fields, and you'll have to learn that on your own. REDCap also has two mobile apps, one called REDCap Mobile for staff to collect data, maybe in something like an iPad or another notepad, tablet computer, and they could be collecting that in the field, and it allows you to collect the data offline and then synchronize back with the server. So I've helped a few groups use that. They were doing that in the Yakima Valley where they were working with farm workers, and they did not have good connectivity there. And they use that. I've also helped some groups in Africa who didn't have good connectivity collect data using the REDCap mobile app. MyCap's another app for participants. I have not used it. I've only played with it a few times. It's a way to collect some limited data from that goes into surveys. And to be honest, I haven't explored it that much, so I can't speak that much about it. This is a cool feature that called the multi-language the multi-language program. I can't remember now. What's the name of the feature? Let me go quick here. So I'll just show you quick. We are using this this server. I work on several different projects on different servers. And in this project, it's called the multi-language management. So basically we have two populations here. This is our instruments. You notice we have quite a few instruments, and they're all in English. But using the multi-language management module, I can go in and create Spanish translations for all the surveys. I don't do it for the forms because the forms are used by staff who all speak English. But I go into here, and all the labels get translated, the ones that are necessary. Some of these are just hidden variables that they don't see, but the ones they see, we actually go in here and get them translated into Spanish, and this all sits alongside the English version. And as the survey, you can actually store for each participant what's their preferred language, and so all communications will be in Spanish. And not just the surveys, any ASIs, automated survey invite emails, alerts, the survey settings if they show up in the user interface, like the survey title. So if I go back here for this, if there's a survey title that shows up, then we would translate the title to, I guess in this case, we hadn't for this particular one yet. This is also the development version, which might be out of step a little with the production version. But it's a cool way, especially if you're working with multiple languages. Lots of other stuff I've not mentioned. The REDCap, I hope you're seeing here, is a really capable product that's real well maintained, works in so many cases, has become the sort of de facto tool that most research in the United States and even throughout the world, from universities and research institutions, will use REDCap because it is really become the standard, and it's free to those institutions to use, and it really supports research. It's a great product, sorry. Online designer surveys, invite tools, reports, imports, project status, audit trail, mobile options, and we showed some of these things and lots more. So now I'll just mention next steps for you. If you do want to get an account, not one that expires every 7 days, you need to go, if you're working at University of Washington, not working specifically with CSDE, who's hosting this class, then we suggest going to ITHS. They also offer training classes. Actually, they have 3 or 4 classes, I think, in REDCap. So if you want to specifically hone in on something like longitudinal design of projects, they have a class for you on that. And reporting, they have a class on that, those sort of things. But also to get your account, you would go here. If you're going to be hosting with CSDE and you have a reason to work with CSDE, then you would just email csde_help@uw.edu or contact the REDCap admin at your institution if you're at some other institution. So like to open it up to questions at this time. Gotta believe someone has a question. Just unmute yourself to ask. Or a comment. Even if you want to say hooray for REDCap, whatever.
I thought this workshop was really good. So thank you, Paul.
You're welcome, Barbara. Any questions about, say, you're planning to use it for some research project or some student project? You want to know what it can do, or if it can be used, Let me know. Let us know. Anybody else? Matt, I'll let you speak then.
Sure. Well, I just want to say, thanks, Paul, again, for teaching the workshop. I agree. It's great introductory. I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I use this? How do I best incorporate REDCap in a already existing research study? Or maybe you're just starting to scratch the surface of an idea that you have about implementing something in the future. Paul, having worked with this for a long period of time, is a great resource at that early conceptualization stage, knowing where a decision now will get you 6 months or a year from now, and making sure that you make decisions and implement things in a way that you get the outcome that you're expecting. Or perhaps pointing out some pros and cons of making different choices now that you wouldn't be aware of until you got to that point. So even if you don't have questions now, because Paul has just wowed you with the amazingness of REDCap, highly encourage you to reach back out to myself or Paul. CSDE, we just have a general support helpline as well for our services. Any of those can be utilized to ask more questions if they come up in the future.
Yeah, and I'm a good resource too, or both of us are. Just if you're not sure if REDCap has a feature or how you'd accomplish something in REDCap, I'm sure most of the time I can say, oh yeah, it does have a feature, or I know specifically it doesn't. And or I might say it doesn't specifically have that, but have you thought of doing it this way? Okay, one question in the chat. The multi-language option. I have a project on ITHS and the toolbar is only showing the options, languages, and settings. Sorry, it's only showing you what?
Languages and settings only,
I don't know
and
what.
save changes. So it wasn't the same options that you had on your screen.
I'm not familiar with what you're seeing in languages and settings. So there was.
So I have the multi-language management.
Oh, you do have
and
multi-language management.
yes, I logged in that, and then
Okay.
there is only languages, like one option, languages, and then settings.
Yeah, that's because you have to add a language as you go. There's a process to set up a new language. So you have to add that. There's a green button that says add a new language. Are you seeing that? Oh, I don't know if you're looking at it now. I can share the screen. So when you're setting up a new project with language that's in multi-language, so I actually enabled it for books for some reason. In this setup section, it gives you some steps here, and one of them is the add the new language. Oh, and it's saying because it's in draft mode, I think I have to get rid of. Oh, I have to put it in draft mode. Yeah, if it's already in production, I think you were saying that, right? Your project, is that right?
No, it's still in development.
Oh, it's still in development. Well, whether or not I can do it. I can only, if it is in production, then I can't, this won't be enabled until I put it into draft mode. So yeah, I can add a language, and there's sort of a process, and it's a little complicated. So you'll want to ask ITH for support in setting up the language. It's not trivial.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
just, I'll mention two things. You'll be responsible for putting in the translations of your own items, your surveys, right? But is this going to be Spanish?
Yeah.
But there is a repository of language text for all the built-in REDCap user interface elements, like when a survey, certain things like when surveys get launched and there's error messages and stuff. Someone has already translated that into Spanish, all those text pieces. So you want to add the base language, which is responsible for all of the parts of REDCap that are not your fields and survey saying. And so you'll want to add that first and then start layering in the translations of all your survey elements and survey settings and possibly the ASIs and that stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
And so talk to IHS. I'm guessing if they're supporting that, they should have someone to be able to assist you with setting up the language and grabbing the latest Spanish, the Spanish base language that will translate the REDCap parts.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. More questions? I actually spent some time learning the language stuff for this other project that I work on besides dog aging project. And it's kind of complicated. So be aware of that.
Yeah,
It's not
but very
something you can
helpful.
do in a day.
Yeah, but it's very helpful actually. Yeah.
Good. There's no other questions. I guess we'll end early. Thank you, Kristen, Barbara, Jose.
Thanks for your time.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. I'm going to pause the recording or stop it.